Since 2005, there's been a 50% increase in the number of children removed from their families and placed in out-of-home care. That comes at an enormous economic and human cost. The Australian Centre for Social Innovation, based in South Australia, has found a radically different approach to dealing with this growing national problem. CEO Brenton Caffin joins us now in the studio to talk about how local networks of families in Adelaide are helping other families to thrive. Welcome, Brenton, to the show, and thank you. Tell us more about how this new model of family support operates then.
So Family by Family is a network of families, and we find, we train and we link up families who've been through tough times and have come out the other side with, we call these our sharing families, with those families who recognise there are still things that they'd like to change in their life. And around those link-ups we provide coaching and support for the sharing families so that they're not just thrown to the wolves, and to ensure that we continue to focus on change. And then finally we make sure we capture that change so that the change is visible for families and they can see that they can achieve their goals and they can make a difference, and that we can also evaluate for impact.
So in a way it's people helping themselves. You take families who've done it tough but been able to get through, and you link them up with families that are doing it tough but are struggling.
That's right. I mean, we found that who best to actually help families than people who've been there and done that and can actually speak their language and talk from a place of really lived experience and quite an authentic experience that people can share.
It's great, because presumably you could do it in other areas. You could, people looking for employment, for example, a whole series of areas that you could use a similar technique of trying to get people with support to help each other.
Absolutely. I think what we're seeing is a move away from, we're in addition to sort of professionalised responses, to ones where we can actually engage the community and use that experience and wisdom that resides in the community by linking them up with one another.
And how was the program actually developed, or why was the idea kind of thought of in the first place?
Well, basically we asked around to find the biggest, knottiest social problem that we could find, and as you mentioned in your intro, removing children from families is a big social problem. And we brought together a multidisciplinary team of designers and anthropologists and social workers and sociologists to look at this in a different way, and we spent time with people to understand their life and their context, and from that we built some insights that allowed us to then generate this potential solution, which we then tested out and prototyped with these families, and they were effectively co-conspirators, they were co-designers of this model.
Wouldn't some people say, well, that's fine, but wouldn't it be better? If you've got case workers and social workers, wouldn't they have much greater skills to help struggling families?
I think they do in some respects, but what they don't have is that personal touch. This is, if you like, a non-professional response that sits alongside professional approaches.
And people can talk from their own experience about how they manage to hold their families together, for example.
Absolutely. I mean, we said along, we weren't trying to create many social workers with our families. They're there to do essentially a very different role.
Now, I've been out of the public service 3.5 years. I know you've been in the public service. But I'm sure as anything, if I presented a program like this, the first response for Treasury would be, that's a pretty expensive way of dealing, for example, with the relatively few families. There are much cheaper ways of doing it. So what's our argument back to them?
Well, I mean, I guess the overall argument is, taking children out of families is a very expensive activity, and putting them up in out of home care is very expensive. So we need to find different solutions that avoids that happening.
So this is an investment.
It is an investment.
And a quick one to finish off. What's the application beyond these families that you're talking about?
Sure. So we're actually looking at using this radical redesign approach in the ageing space, particularly looking around caring. We are actually talking with government departments about how they can apply some of these approaches within their own activity. So there's light yet at the end of the tunnel.
Well, I think it's a great approach. Thank you, Brenton.
Thanks, Peter.
Brenton Caffin there from the Australian Centre for Social Innovation.